Welcome to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast. Use the power of discovering new habits to create success in all areas of life. Body, fitness and nutrition, being, spirituality, passion and purpose, balance, marriage, kids and relationships, business, marketing, sales, leadership and systems. Transform your life by learning how habits work. And now your host, a husband, father, entrepreneur, trainer, coach, and warrior, Jesse Ewell.
Welcome back to the Habit-Based Lifestyle Podcast. I am your host, Jesse Ewell, and today we're going to be talking about the habit of perspective. So this morning, I went out surfing over at Doheny Beach, and this is something that I have been doing since July of this year. But surfing is something I've really found how much I enjoyed it, how much that I love getting in the water first thing in the morning, sometimes watching the sun come up. And not only that, but just being out in nature early in the morning. And so something that happened this morning was as I was sitting out surfing, it was supposed to be, I looked at the surf report, it was supposed to be pretty good waves and sets rolling in. But as I got out there, I started to realize and I started to ask people, hey, how are the waves? And a lot of the people said, well, they're not very good and they weren't great and so on and so on. But one of the things that began to happen as I caught less and less waves the longer and longer I was out there for almost an hour and a half. The feelings that started to come up for me was I started to feel a little bit frustrated. I started to get annoyed. Here I am. I'm about 3 weeks out from actually going to a surf camp in Waco, Texas. I have went from a board that was 9'6" down to 8 feet. There's nothing more than I want to be out practicing being on an 8-foot board. And, I can't, at least not in the way that I imagine myself practicing because, throughout the summer, the waves were really good. And the last probably month I've been out, the waves haven't been the best. You can still go out, but it's just kind of hit or miss. And so I started to feel like, man, am I wasting my time being out here? Am I wasting my energy? Am I spending time? Am I spending thought? Am I spending energy being frustrated and pissed off about being out in the ocean? And I started to think about all the things that I could be doing. I started to really think about and push myself out away from where I currently was. Now, one of the cool things about surfing is a lot of times it brings you just to the present moment and gets you to focus on that. But here was the focus for me, or at least the story I began to tell myself was, these waves suck. I'm wasting my time and I could be doing so much more than what I'm doing right now. And normally when I go out surfing is many times the story I tell myself is how much I enjoy just being out in the water. How much I enjoy being out in nature. And I started to think about, man, what do I really want in this moment? What's the fruit that I'm looking for, being out surfing? And I really started to think about, man, I just want to enjoy surfing. I want to enjoy and be at peace with just being in the ocean and not really be so much about catching waves. Yes, catching waves is amazing. It feels great. But it only really takes one wave to keep you coming back. And the biggest thing I wanted just to catch a few waves. I wanted to practice on the 8-foot board and prepare for me to go to a surf camp in Waco, Texas in about 3 weeks. And so that was what I wanted. That was where I was starting to shift to. But what I started to see was, hey, what's really working in my life today? What's the perspective of my life today? And if I look at my life today, I'm surfing. I'm in the water. I'm living in California. I'm living the lifestyle that I actually created with my wife and my family. And what's working is I began to change my perspective. And I want you to think about this for a minute. I began to change my perspective and look at where I was at 3 months ago, 6 months ago. Let's go back to 6 months ago. See, one of the things that I realized is if I look back 6 months ago, I was not even surfing. 6 months ago would have been roughly May. We hadn't even ran our first marriage boot camp event. I wasn't surfing. Think about this. I wasn't surfing at all 6 months ago. We hadn't even done our first marriage boot camp. And then I go back to 12 months ago. 12 months ago, I hadn't even launched Habit-Based Lifestyle as the brand. I hadn't even got my book out, my podcast that by this time listening to this will be over 140 episodes. Not only that, I wasn't coaching my own clients. I was working for Wake Up Warrior. And so that's a year ago. Now, if I go back 2 years ago, I hadn't moved to California with my wife and kids. I was still coaching for Wake Up Warrior. Not only that, I still had my 2 gyms. I hadn't even thought of, actually, I was kind of thinking about it, but I hadn't even started following through with it, selling my 2 gyms, or me and my wife's gyms. And then not only that, we were still living in Washington and Fox Island. So think about this. 6 months ago, if I put this in perspective, no surfing. 12 months ago, there's no such thing as habit-based lifestyle. 2 years ago, I'm still living in Washington. And so as I began to change my perspective on where I was currently at today and where I had been 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 2 years ago, I started to see the growth that I've experienced along with my wife and my family. And so I started to appreciate how far I've come in a short amount of time. And so that was what began to work. What's not working is having this narrow focus of just focusing on today. And a lot of times we say like, okay, let's just focus on what you can do today. I totally agree with that. But sometimes when we begin to be like, hey, I'm not having a good time, I'm not having fun, I thought this was going to be different. Usually what that means is our focus is narrowing down. We're only looking at today and where we're at. And we get frustrated, like I did, by the waves. I get frustrated by what is out there with the waves. And not only that, but when I actually step back and I start looking through a different lens, a different perspective, one of the things that I begin to do is I begin to appreciate how far I've come. I begin to celebrate and say, man, look at the growth that I've had. And you can think about it this way. If you were looking at a dot, 2 dots on a screen, but your focus was so narrow, you could only see the 1 dot, you wouldn't actually be able to see the other because your eyes just fixated on this one thing. Now, if you step back and you start looking at, hey, where was I on this map 6 months ago, 12 months ago, 2 years ago, you begin to see a trajectory of growth, which creates momentum going forward. And so one of the things that as I begin to do this today, surfing, I began to see, man, I've made a lot of ground. I've gained a lot of ground. I've not only done that, but I've grown in the last 2 years, last year, last 6 months at a 10 to 20x speed. And so when I really step back, I see how much growth I've actually had. And for you, maybe a new habit for you is to begin putting things in perspective. When you get frustrated, you begin to get upset. Maybe for you, it's not where the waves are, But maybe the wave is, where your relationship's at in your marriage. It's easy to focus on what's going wrong. It's easy to spend our time, our thoughts, and energy on what's wrong in our relationship. With the new year coming up, it's easy to spend our time. It's easy to spend our thoughts, and it's easy to spend our energy on where we're not at in our body. Maybe my body fat's not where I want it to be. Maybe I'm feeling lack of energy or low energy. Maybe my bank account is not where it needs to be. But oftentimes, this change of perspective allows us to look back and see, man, I'm making 2 to 3 times more money than I was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And I'm just focused on it today. But here's what I know. If I focus on today only, sometimes that ruins my perspective. But if I can look back 3, 4, 5 years or months, I can see what's actually changed. I can actually see my growth. And not only that, but when I see that, I'm like, man, I guess the waves aren't that bad. I guess the waves are actually better than no waves at all. My relationship with my wife is better than it's ever been. And even if today it wasn't where I wanted it to be, I could still look back and say, man, it's grown so much over the last 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, 2 years. My body is better today than it was 20 years ago, at least from a health perspective. And so one of the things that you have to do is you have to start putting things in perspective, especially when it's time when you get frustrated, especially when you start to get off course, when you start to get into your head. And so there's 4 things that you can do to begin to put things in perspective. Number 1 is to look at, hey, where am I at today? What are the facts about where I'm at today? And as you do this, you're kind of like, man, I'm in the ocean. I'm surfing. I'm in touch with nature. I'm actually getting recharged. And I feel amazing. And so as you look at the facts and you look at the feelings of today, you start to realize, hey, this actually is a really good place for me to be in. I'm at peace with where I'm at today. And you look back 3, 6, 9 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years on how far you've come. And if you feel stuck, this is part 3. Next time you feel stuck, maybe in today, like I did surfing, like shit, I'm not going to catch any waves. You realize everything is in constant motion. You see, the ocean continued to move. The waves continued to come in. They may not have been the best conditions, but they were still coming in. But everything in your life is in constant motion. So just because you feel stuck doesn't mean you're stuck. It usually means you're thinking and you're doing things that get you the same results. And that's why you feel stuck. But everything in your life is in constant motion. And then number 4 is you got to shift. You got to shift out of this mindset of being stuck or just getting out of your feelings, and you have to begin to shift and appreciate and celebrate where you are today and how far you've come. Because if you can't do those 2 things, you can't appreciate what's coming to you. You can't celebrate what's coming to you. And so the important thing to do is to shift out of this and learn to appreciate and celebrate how far you've come. So I want to ask yourself, where in your life do you need to change your perspective? Maybe it's inside of your marriage. For many of the couples that come into habit-based marriage, one of the first things that we have to work with people on is just changing their perspective. Maybe it's inside of your fitness and your nutrition. You're spending all your time and energy focused on what you're not doing, like eating, like exercising, and maybe just changing your perspective on, hey, here's the things that I can really focus on, what I can do. Maybe it's inside of your business and your bank account. And that little change of perspective shows you, hey, man, you're actually making more money than you've ever made in your life. And that little change in perspective sets you up for momentum going forward, and you can begin to produce at a high level. But I think the first thing that we have to do is we have to look at, where are you today? Look how far you've come. And if you feel stuck, realize that it's just a feeling. Everything is in constant motion. And once you're in that place, just begin to shift out of it and appreciate and celebrate how far you've come so you can create momentum on what you have coming to you going forward. I want to thank you guys for being on here today. If you are looking to connect further with a group of like-minded people, join myself and so many others in the Habit-Based Lifestyle Secrets group on Facebook, where I will be dropping daily habits to help you live to your full potential. Maybe you want to be one of our next case studies and begin living this habit-based lifestyle. If you have questions, comments, requests, feel free to contact me, Jesse at habitbasedlifestyle.com. Until next episode, have a great day.